Hi there. Thanks for coming back to Peter's Flight Log. I'm Peter. I'm a student pilot and I am recording every single flight in my pursuit of a private pilot's license since flight 1 and hour 1 all the way to now. So now is actually September 2024. It's been about a month since I completed my RPL examination, and you can read all about it here on my flight log. That was flight 65, and as I said, it's about a month since flight 65. In that time, I've put in another 2 flights. I had to space them out a little bit because I had a lot of work to catch up with, and the weather also wasn't that good, so I kind of delayed it, but I did manage to get those flights in, and in this review I'm going to show you what I've done. So here's the first flight that was about 2 weeks after the RPO exam flight. So this was flight 65, and in this flight, again being the first one after my RPL test, I just wanted to take it easy. At that point I didn't have my license yet, so I couldn't go solo. So I had the instructor with me, and there was a good opportunity just to make that flight not just a repeat and maintenance, but also to improve a few things, especially my landings. I'll come to that in a moment. So in this particular flight, as you can see, I did most of it towards the western part of the training area. So there's Newcastle, up around here there's the lakes, and up around this area is where we usually do forced landing practices, and did a couple of forced landings there. I also did a few steep turns, and it was an opportunity to practice my radio calls as well, departing and then inbound and arriving and joining the circuit again. But I also spent a lot of time in the circuit. Now the main thing that I wanted to practice on this particular flight was my landings, because my landings traditionally have been fairly flat on all 3 wheels, and since I changed schools, I've been trying to make sure that my landings are much smoother and on the main wheel. So there was a good opportunity to do that. So that was pretty much it with this particular flight. I used the school's Cessna 150, which is the same plane that I used for most of my RPL test training and then the test itself. So that's it with this particular flight. I'm going to go into the one that I completed yesterday, because there were 2 challenges on this particular flight that I want to talk about. The first challenge is that I decided to switch to the 172 aircraft. I started my RPL training with the 172, but when I switched schools, I switched also to the 152 because it was an easier plane to handle, and that took me all the way to the RPL exam. But now that I'm transitioning to the PPL curriculum and syllabus, I'm going to be flying much longer distances between airports. Some of those will be cross-country multi-hour flights. So the 150 doesn't have the comfort and, but most important, the speed and the endurance to get me to the places that I need to go for the PPL. So I'll be doing all those flights in the 172. And since I haven't flown on a 172 for several months, I wanted today to be a kind of a re-familiarization with that aircraft. So that was one of the goals of yesterday's session. Another goal was to practice lots of bits and pieces, but especially crosswind landings. So yesterday the winds were fairly strong, and they were essentially perpendicular, almost 90 degrees to the runway. So as we're looking at the runway in this orientation, I'm just going to switch off a few things. All right, so if you're looking at the runway in this orientation, the windsock is up there, and the wind was coming from the left, almost perpendicular, 90 degrees from the left, usually around 10 knots, but in some cases the windsock was just fully horizontal, so I'd say at least 15 knots. So quite a challenging environment for me. I haven't had control of the aircraft landing in such conditions. So it was an opportunity for me to practice. I would not have gone solo in such conditions, but having an instructor next to me was an additional safety layer. So I thought it was a good opportunity to get myself into such a situation. So I'm going to come back to my landings a little later. I just wanted to show you what this particular flight was. So we departed from runway 35 and then did a downwind departure to the training area out here, which is towards the southern end of the training area near Cessna. So up here, I practiced a few steep turns, a few stalls, and a couple of configurations, like landing configuration with 20-degree flaps and clean configuration, no flaps at all, just to remember how to use rudder here and not ailerons to stabilize the plane. Also, again, I was amazed how much time it takes to stall a Cessna 172. Is really, you really have to want to do it. A lot has to go into stalling a plane, and of course I reminded myself of the stall stick position, which really has the yoke has to be all the way back. You can see the stall practice. Not sure if Clara Hoy has picked it, but we did the stall practice around here, and the nice thing about being able to see this now is that during the stalls I didn't lose much altitude. You can see a little bump going down here, but that was pretty much it. So maybe 100 feet or less of lost altitude. So after doing this practice, we continued to return back to the aerodrome. And another thing to point out on this particular day was how busy the airspace was and the radio space. It was constant transmissions. So it took me a lot of effort just to listen and paint a mental picture of where planes were in 3D space and try to position them east, west, north, northwest from our position, just to maintain awareness. Originally, I wanted to actually go to the eastern part of the training area, so around here, but just before us another plane departed in that direction, so we decided to go south instead. Anyway, so we came back. The circuit at that point was very busy. Again, it was new for me. It's as busy as I think it's ever been. I don't remember it being more busy than what it was like yesterday, and that's because there were a lot of people flying there after several days of really bad weather with strong winds. So it sets everyone's training schedule back. So this one day that was also a Sunday that was relatively good, a lot of planes were in the air. So as I was trying to get into the circuit, I was just so busy that my instructor, Tyler, jumped in, make the radio call, got us to do a loop just to improve spacing, and then join mid crosswind here into downwind, and then join the circuit. So that was quite interesting. I'm going to be reviewing that audio just to get a better understanding of what the radio call was. It was quite long. Okay, once I was in the circuit, I started practicing my crosswind landings. The first one was actually really bad. So even though there was crosswind, I did deploy, I think, 20-degree flaps, and the approach was relatively okay. The plane was relatively stable. Approach was good. However, I did get a sudden gust of wind as I was around here. I just remember the plane just moving off the center line a little bit to the right, and there was also a little roll. So that kind of messed it up for me, and I remember touching the front wheel. Most likely the front wheel made contact. I didn't like that situation. It was quite unstable, so one full throttle became airborne again and did a go around. So the remaining of the touch and goes, I did all in clean configuration, no flap at all. So the The approaches were a little more flat, but I did have more control, so I was much better in keeping the plane on the center line, and at least making sure that the real main wheels would touch down instead of the front wheel, like in the first case. Not perfect by any chance, or by any measure. I've done much better landings in the past, but considering that I had a 172, so a larger plane, it does have a little more distance between the pilot and the ground, so I need to take that into account. Much stronger crosswind as well, and of course landing flapless, you do need to come in with a bit of throttle as well in order to manage the speed and the approach, and putting all that together. Not too harsh on myself. I think I did all right. So the last 3 landings were quite safe. I did a touch and go, and practice pass fit checklists, bump fish checklists, lights, carburetor heat on and off the appropriate times, listening to the radio. All that worked out quite well. I just did one mistake here. Speaking of the radio, the radio space was too busy to transmit as I was approaching to turn into base. So around here normally is where I do my transmission. It was too busy, so I waited for the radio to settle down a little and made my transmission around here on base, but I said that I was on final for touch and go. It wasn't worth fixing that because like a couple of seconds later literally I was on final, so I guess that's okay. But even if I wanted to transmit, I wouldn't be able because someone else had jumped on the channel anyway. Alright, so that's pretty much it. So I had 2 good flights in the time since the RPL exam. My plan is to now go into the PPL program. I'm going to be having a break due to travel for the next 6-7 weeks. So I'll be back here in end of November or beginning of December, and depending on the weather, I'm going to start booking flights for PPL. Now, between now and then, I'm going to work on the theory part of the PPL syllabus in order to prepare myself for the written PPL exam. So ideally, I'd like to do that and pass it before I actually start my PPL flying, because PPL flying is quite demanding. There's a lot of theory anyway. There's navigation, there's meteorology, there's planning. Each flight requires a few hours of groundwork and then a few more hours of flight time. So these are day-long events. So I'm just thinking that my workload plus the PPL theory exam probably will not allow me to do all these things together. So I'm going to do the theory first, pass that, and then go on with the flying. So I've got a bunch of materials. I'm going to write a separate log about the materials that I'll be using for the PPL study and the exam. I'm going to do mock-up exams as well, and then book my PPL exam, I hope sometime in early December, and pass it, and then the coast is clear for PPL flying. Okay, I think that's long enough for one review video, so I'll leave it at that. I hope you enjoyed it and it was informative. Until next time, I wish you safe flying and safe landings. I'll see you next time.